Over the Christmas and holiday period, we all like to do our best for our family, our friends, and for that matter, ourselves. We enjoy buying presents, we enjoy buying little luxuries for ourselves. We perhaps indulge in meals and indulge in other festivities, and that's all very well and all very nice. However, it comes at a cost. And many people, unfortunately, are using store cards and credit cards for these indulgences. The thing is, store cards and credit cards can be very expensive, and we don't want to see anybody getting into misery into the new year. Debt often emerges following the Christmas period because of overindulgence, perhaps buying things that we can't afford. To try to minimise that risk of getting into debt over the next period, the next few months, it's better to pay things in cash if you possibly can, because as I said earlier, store cards and credit cards can be expensive. The day of reckoning comes when the bills come through the post. Christmas debt doesn't manifest itself at Christmas, it manifests itself normally from March onwards when the bills start to come through. The bills come through in January, it may be difficult paying them in February, the frightening letters start to come through in March. That coupled with the winter fuel bills coming in as well, and all sorts of extra expenditure there may be in the winter period. So to try to minimise the risk, think if you can't afford it now, will you be able to afford it later? And also, take into account all commitments. It's very easy to look at items in a particular shop and think I can afford that. Look at somewhere else, I can afford that. In isolation, maybe that's the case. But can we afford it when it's all added together? Examples of that are the buy now, pay later. Perhaps we're paying for last year's summer holiday. Perhaps we're paying for last Christmas. Mail order catalogues in particular, very often it's buy now, pay in 52 weeks' time. They were all doing it last year and the year before, and they're doing it again this year. So we're possibly starting to kick in and pay for the mail order catalogue presents that we bought last Christmas, while we're adding to it for this Christmas. And what about the three-piece suite that we bought in the summer? That we don't have to start paying that until next year. They all kick in at some stage. So it's worth taking stock. What are the ongoing liabilities? What are the outstanding liabilities? What liabilities are likely to come? Shop around. Do some window shopping. Do some online shopping. Go around the stores, see if there's something that's cheaper. Sometimes there's last minute bargains just before Christmas. Sometimes we buy things early and then we find we've lost at a discounted price later on. But the important message really is to think on what we're actually spending our money on now in the lead up to Christmas, what it's going to cost us after Christmas, on top of other bills that may come in at that time. And we hope everybody will have a very happy Christmas, a very happy holiday period, and if not a debt-free new year, at least a new year that is manageable financially. If you find later on that you have got into difficulties, or for that matter in difficulties now with a debt problem, there are things that can be done. Now, it's important to address the debt situation. It will not go away. It is very easy to dig one's head in the sand, but that doesn't help the situation. It doesn't help the situation by not opening the envelopes, by not answering telephone calls that come in. If there is a debt situation, speak to the lender, speak to the credit card company, speak to the bank. Try to minimise overdrafts, particularly unplanned overdrafts, because they can be expensive. But if you're likely to have an overdraft, speak to someone at the bank. If you could find a live person to speak to at the bank these days, because they tend to run computer systems. But in addition to that, there are advice agencies. There's a Citizens Advice Bureau. There's other debt advice agencies that one could go to. We could all go to get advice. And there are various options that are open. Rescheduling the debts, for example. Looking at debt arrangement schemes. In extreme cases, perhaps a bankruptcy is a solution, and it does work for some people. There are also trust deeds, all depending on circumstances. But the first thing is, either take stock yourself, or go to an advice agency and get a financial statement drawn up to see the extent of the debt, and then to look at the options. At the end of the day, they could all be addressed. Okay, some of life's little luxuries may have to go, but the debt situation has to be addressed, and it's very important, of course, to maintain and retain accommodation, to keep a roof over our heads, and then look at the non-priority debts after that. There is always a solution, but don't leave it too late. It is easier to handle if it's dealt with at the early stage. Now, the first thing is spending the money. Then it's getting the bill. Then it's getting the reminders. Then it goes to a debt collection agency and various strengths of letters will come out after that. Then there's a threat of court action. Then there is the court action. Then there is the court decision. And then there's perhaps sheriff officers to enforce that court decision. All of that is a long way off, but it is quite a path of misery on top of any other problems that we all may have at the same time. So they can still be addressed even after a debt has been to court, but it's actually easier to deal with it at an early stage. So if anticipating a problem or in a problem, do address it. Many people from all walks of life have multiple debt situations for various reasons, but it is important to address it and to seek advice. Also, many agencies, voluntary agencies in particular, will deal with debt situations free of charge. There are other commercial companies out there who will do the same thing, but they will charge a percentage up front and take fees for their doing it. That's actually only increasing the debt by having to pay the commercial company, and also it means that the creditors are getting less money that they are owed because money is going to a commercial company, and sometimes the creditors don't actually like that. But do seek advice as early as possible if a problem is being anticipated. Nowadays it's very tempting to go to the payday loan companies, the companies that give small loans, say £500 tops. A few of them might give £1,000, unlike the banks who may give £20,000–30,000. But anyone using those companies tend to be in a state of desperation, in that they're unlikely through their credit history to get money from the high street banks, to get a loan from the high street banks. They will get a small loan from the payday loan companies. However, because it is adverse and it's risky credit, the payday companies do charge very high interest. And when you're paying them back on a monthly basis and having to go to them in the first place means that obviously you have difficulty. And then when you're paying them back on a monthly basis, you're not getting a full wage or a full salary because of the amount that's being paid back to them. They're quite easy to work with because they know they're taking on risky debt in the first instance, but they are expensive. Now, while it may be tempting to get some quick cash on the same day in your pocket to spend that afternoon, it comes at a cost, and it comes at a high cost. So it's worth at least considering what it's going to come to at the end of the day before indulging in the payday loans. Another temptation, of course, is that if anyone's in arrears with 2 or 3 or more accounts, credit cards, store cards or whatever, to go to another company and take out another loan to clear the arrears, which it will do for a while, but that's introducing yet another creditor. And so it goes on. We can do that again, and eventually it leads to a very big multiple debt situation. If you need money, shop around, look for the best deal that happens to be there at the time, that the money that you can get access to, the credit you can have access to. Might not always be the high street banks, but there are companies out there that can be very expensive, so look at the ones that are a bit less expensive. Look to credit cards that has an interest-free, at least for a period. But remember, if you're late in making any payment at all, even 1 day late in any payment, then the interest-free stops, and all the full whack of interest gets thrown back onto the account again immediately. Likewise, for anything that's buy now, pay later, if it's not paid in time, then that facility fails. There is no easy option to accessing money, particularly if it's in a state of desperation, but there are organisations that are less expensive than others. One that springs to mind are the credit unions. And there's also some other companies, some banks that don't advertise as high street banks, but can actually offer loans to people that would have difficulty in the high street banks. Again, shop around, and credit unions is certainly something to look at. To access funds from a credit union, of course, you have to put some money into it. That's what it means. It's member owned, and you put money in, and you can get some cheap loans from them. But other than that, there really is no easy access to getting money without it becoming at a cost. The service of money can be expensive, but it is possible to shop around and get some better deals and some cheaper deals. There are also some banks that will give bank accounts, current accounts with a debit card, regardless of the credit history. And a Citizen Advice Bureau can certainly advise on those banks that would be able to help, but it wouldn't necessarily give credit. Well, a Citizen Advice Bureau and presumably other organisations have access to some banks that will open bank accounts regardless of a credit history. We can certainly do that in Glasgow.